Thank you. Great to be here. Now, I'm going to start today with a little thought experiment. Let's just all take a moment and consider what would have happened if COVID-19 had arrived in a world without cloud computing. Now, with the lockdown measures in place, a lot of businesses would simply have had no way to work. There would have been no virtual Teams meetings, no instant messaging, no shared drives, no virtual access to corporate services. And for all of us at home, there would have been no online classroom to help with homeschooling the children. There would have been no endless library of backdated box sets to keep us entertained at the end of the day. And of course, I just wouldn't be speaking to you today. Wired would have had to cancel this event. And so, while there's no escaping the fact that the pandemic has been devastating, there's also no doubt that the economic fallout would have been much worse without the cloud. So, if there was any lingering doubt, that has disappeared. The business case for the cloud has been well and truly made. And that's a business case that I think everyone here will be familiar with, and it really hinges on three key things. The first is that the cloud allows you unprecedented speed and agility, and this has been clear throughout the pandemic. The cloud-first businesses have found it much easier to adapt and to manage costs. They've been able to quickly roll out virtual working for their employees, and they found it much easier to adapt and to react quickly to that volatility of demand that we've seen, particularly at the start of the pandemic. Secondly, then, by allowing you to harness data and intelligence, the cloud gives you an unprecedented level of insight that allows you to make the best decisions. And our work with Sainsbury's is a really good example of this. We worked with the team there to create a one-of-a-kind trend spotting solution for food based on Google Cloud. And that solution brings together data from many different sources, from blogs, from social media, from customers and employees, and it predicts the local food trends that will be most popular in the coming months. So Sainsbury's can now predict and understand their customers' preferences, and they can make sure that they're bringing the products to their shelves that customers really want. So during COVID-19, as the trends for home baking, comfort food, and even those homemade cocktails, the quarantinis, started to emerge, Sainsbury's was well prepared. Finally, the cloud breaks down the barriers between other companies. It allows you to connect with them in new ways. And some of the most disruptive innovation we're seeing today is coming from these cloud-powered ecosystem collaborations, whether that's in the automotive industry, competitors coming together like BMW and Daimler to work on autonomous vehicles, or players across industries like Adidas and Siemens coming together to engineer personalised sportswear. So the case seems to be made. The cloud is where it's at when it comes to disruptive innovation. But have we really thought about enough about what happens over the long term? In a world where every business is a cloud business, and we are all avid consumers of those products and services that are powered by the cloud. And one question in particular really strikes me, and that's, are we really considering the potential unintended consequences of mass cloud adoption at scale? Now, if there's one thing that we've learned over the past century, it's that amazing breakthrough technologies can really change the world for the better, but they can also come with unintended negatives. If we think about innovation in plastics in the 50s, for example, that helped to drive the consumer economy, it improved medical hygiene, it reduced food waste. But we're now all too aware of the impact that it's had on our oceans. The invention of white goods like the fridge freezer, were instrumental in the liberation of women in the 50s and 60s, but there were unintended consequences for our ozone layer. And then the combustion engine that helped to modernise the world. It's been at the centre of economic growth for the 20th century, but it has also delivered an outsized contribution to climate change. Now, all of these lessons have taught us all to be more responsible as businesses. We know that we need to think through the unintended consequences and put in place the right mitigations. So what is it that we need to be aware of with the cloud? Well, for me, there's one very clear and emerging priority that we all need to focus on, and that's sustainability. because in an obvious sense, the cloud is the greener option. You can discard your on-premise data centers, companies can start to share computer and storage resources, and therefore they can start to share power. So their computing output can increase while they manage their energy consumption, and they can keep it lower. And at Accenture, we've carried out research that shows that if you opt for only the lowest level of cloud integration, if you just do the most basic migration to the cloud without any major redesign, you can reduce your carbon emissions by up to 84%. That's a very quick and a very sizable win. But let's think about what else happens when every business is a cloud business. Our capacity to store and to process data is vastly increased. And that means that data grows exponentially. And as consumers, we're partly to blame for this increase thanks to our love of digital. YouTube alone generates an annual carbon footprint that's similar to the size of a city like Glasgow. And in 2019, last year, Netflix consumed enough energy to power over 40,000 average US homes for a year. Now, this level of consumption is only going to increase in our personal lives and in our business lives. We're now on the cusp of a new era of connectivity driven by 5G and the Internet of Things, and that's one that's going to demand more compute and storage resources, more processing power, and ultimately more energy. So if we're to mitigate this risk, it's really vital that sustainability is baked into the cloud right from design through to implementation. And the hyperscalers are now looking to do just that. Google, Microsoft, and AWS have all announced plans to become carbon negative and move to 100% renewable energy. And Google and Microsoft also plan to offset all the carbon that they've produced during the entire lifetime of their companies. Now, these are ambitious goals and they're supported by clear tactical plans. But it's not just the responsibility of the cloud providers to design for the future. There are other ways that every organisation can make a difference. And one of those is through greater use of the circular economy, designing our operations to minimise waste and pollution. And businesses can use cloud-based platforms to promote this circular economy and help them trace their value chains more rigorously, and it can help them to recover the value from unused materials and waste. And some companies are already doing this very successfully. Banyan Nation is a great example. It's an award-winning circular economy example, and it's India's first vertically integrated plastic recycling company. And they use mobile and cloud-based technology platforms to recycle plastic that can be used for the packaging of new products. Banyan Nation have recycled over 7 million pounds of plastic, and they've integrated thousands of informal waste sector workers into their supply chain. Now, initiatives like this are made possible by the cloud, but there are other ways that we can embrace sustainability to overcome some of those unintended consequences. And one that I think has real promise is around sustainable software engineering, and particularly green AI. And again, another thought experiment. I'd like you to consider for a moment the way in which analytics and AI tools are often designed. Most companies today want, in those well-worn words, to move fast and to break things. And so when it comes to developing new digital products and services and delivering new digital solutions, it's all about getting to a minimum viable product as quickly as possible. And in AI, we quickly iterate algorithms and models till we get something that works. And as soon as we've got something that works, we launch it at scale to get ahead of the competition. Now, that's a really effective approach to innovation and to differentiation. But it can mean that the tools that get released are not the most efficient way of achieving the goal that we had in mind. And really, until now, that's been fine. There might have been a more efficient way to get from A to B, but the most important thing is that we quickly found the way to do the job, we quickly found a way to adopt and use the new technology, and we got ahead of the competition. But the problem is that not all AI is created equal. And when an inefficient AI tool scales, so too do the inefficiencies. And at scale, across a whole enterprise, that means a lot of processing power is going to waste. In the research we've done in our labs, we found that increasing the accuracy of an AI calculation by just 2% can result in a 7-fold jump in the energy consumption. So we really have to ask ourselves, do we really need that extra 2% certainty? And if we do need that extra 2% certainty, is it really worth 7 times the cost? Now, the problem is, if we continue down this path of moving fast and breaking things without asking these questions, we're effectively storing up an analytics energy debt for future generations to deal with. And it's the businesses and the consumers 10 years down the line who will have to address these challenges. So I believe the better approach would be to think more about AI efficiency now, to think more about sustainable software engineering now, at this crucial moment before the cloud really does dominate everything that we do. If we look back again through history, the greatest feats of innovation and of engineering have blended function with finesse. They've delivered elegant solutions to really thorny and complex problems. And innovation in the age of the cloud must be no different. It must be purposeful and sustainable, using code that achieves its goals, but using the fewest possible resources. And I think it's really encouraging that we're starting to see some early signs of change in this space. For example, there's a group of machine learning practitioners who have launched a website that allows AI developers to test the carbon footprint of their work. I think that's a brilliant innovation, and we need to see much more of that sort of thinking. Finally, though, and really importantly, I believe that green coding, sustainable software engineering, isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. And it's clear for all of us to see that while as customers we all want to have the latest products and services as fast as we can, but we also increasingly expect businesses to act in a responsible way. And at the moment, there's still a kind of disconnect because environmental concerns are rising up to the top of the agenda for consumers. But many businesses aren't yet addressing these concerns in some key areas. And that really includes software development and how we design and we implement the latest technologies. Scrutiny over environmental business practices is only going to intensify. And so organisations really need to seize the opportunity to act in the right way now before the spotlight falls on them. It's clear that at this moment we're entering a new phase in the story of the cloud. The business case debate has already been won, and soon all businesses will be cloud first. Those that don't adopt the cloud wholeheartedly simply aren't going to be able to keep pace. So the key now is really to think long term. If we start having these conversations around sustainability as an urgent priority, then we're putting ourselves in the best place for the future. The cloud is transformative. It is going to remake our world for the better. But if we want to get all the upside without any of the downside, then we need to be proactive, we need to face the big challenges head on, and we need to design now for a more sustainable future. Thank you.
Emma, many thanks for that. Great to have you with us. I just want to sort of like take us back really to the beginning of your talk when you talked about, what would the last 6 months have been like without the cloud. Clearly, there's been an enormous acceleration of organisations moving their businesses, their operations to the cloud. I'd just love to get your sense, and when you're talking to clients, what are the main barriers that organisations have to moving to the cloud, and how best to overcome that?
That's a really good question. And I think, we've certainly seen while clients were starting to think about their journey to cloud, this last 6 to 8 months has really made it an imperative, because everybody's realized that they needed to be, every business needs to be more digital, needs to be able to move more quickly, needs greater insight to help them make decisions and to react and to be proactive. And so I think really, one of the barriers has always been about making the business case for a large enterprise, because obviously it's a major undertaking to kind of migrate everything that you do into the cloud. But I think companies are overcoming that more, first of all, because the imperative is much clearer. And second of all, because there are ways that you can start to adopt the cloud without having to do this kind of wholesale shift from A to B. And we talk much more now about companies being able to use technology to get much more into a state of what we call continuous transformation. So what you can do is start to, the Sainsbury's example I gave is a good one. That didn't require a wholesale migration to the cloud. What we did is we took a specific business problem and we built it on the cloud, decoupled from all the other systems. And by doing that, you can kind of create the business case, you start to create some of the momentum, and then you build around that. And I think clients are much more open to that now, and we've got much better techniques using modern software engineering and some of those good case studies to help kind of make that case for a more gradual, continuous migration to and harnessing of the cloud.
And obviously, cloud increases standardization. That's where the value is created, if you like. Is there a risk that this, though, might reduce innovation because things become a little bit too homogenous?
Yeah, I think again a really interesting question, and it's that kind of age-old question of how do you maintain differentiation and competitive advantage if everybody has the same thing. And we've seen in recent years those organizations that were cloud native, that had really adopted digital quickly, have clearly kind of created a competitive differentiation for themselves. If everybody has that, how do you then create differentiation? And I think that's actually, whilst there's maybe a risk that everybody has the same capabilities, the real differentiation for me can come from how you use your data to create insight, to make the best decisions, to know, that intelligence, to know the product that we should create is this, the customer base that we should go after is over here. And also, I think I alluded to it very briefly, but the ability that the cloud gives you to work with new kind of partners and to collaborate in a different way, I think is a real game changer. So the innovation is going to come much more from how you use the insight that you've got and who you work with to do things that are really game changing.
Right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've got questions coming in from the audience. Just one more from me, if I may. You talked a lot about sustainability and the green cloud. I'm interested to get your thoughts on whether you think that obviously there's an acceleration in the adoption of cloud services could risk putting responsibility from individual businesses reaching their environmental goals.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. So could moving to cloud...
Basically, individual businesses, can they pass responsibility for hitting their own environmental goals, and say, look, it's our cloud provider, it's not our problem?
Yeah, I think that is a real risk, and that's why I wanted to pull out as I kind of cover some questions today, that whilst the cloud providers absolutely have a responsibility, it doesn't just lie with them, and I think we need to make sure that this topic remains high on everybody's transformation agenda, and that the scrutiny is not just on the cloud providers, but it's also on every business on how they adopt cloud, how they use cloud, how they design cloud to be sustainable. And I do think, I think as individuals and as consumers, environmental concerns have obviously been rising up the agenda for years now, and really are at the forefront of all of our minds. And I don't think any company will be able to escape that scrutiny. And so I think businesses that maybe put the onus on their suppliers and their providers only do so at their peril.
Let's move on to questions from the audience. We have one that's been upvoted here, and it's saying, can you talk a little bit about cloud waste? What organisations need to carefully consider and plan for as they move to the cloud?
And this is presumably in the sort of the decommissioning of... Yes. Old hardware, exactly. Yeah. And that's I think a really interesting topic, and one about which there's much more focus now than there ever has been. And that is one actually where the cloud providers can really help in the strategy to do the right decommissioning around hardware and make sure that is kind of the environmental impact of that is minimized. And so, whilst I don't have all of the answers here today, I think the key is to make sure that the decommissioning and the environmental impact of the decommissioning is built into the cloud strategy from day one. It's something that's a clear part of the plan, and it's something that the cloud providers and other partners and suppliers can help with. And so it's something that should be kind of done in collaboration, but certainly not one of those afterthoughts that you kind of deal with after you've got all of the kind of benefits of the migration.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So the next question from the audience is really, I guess, about experimentation. Clearly, that's one of the great advantages of moving to the cloud, is you can experiment, you can try new things. But the question really is, how do you avoid getting stuck in an endless pattern of experimentation as you try things out on the cloud? How do you move from that experimentation to delivering real value?
And that is something that I think so many organisations are grappling with right now, and I call it the proliferation of the POC, and particularly in some of the emerging tech. I've seen it working in AI. We just have a proliferation of POCs across an organisation, but nothing that's actually really going to scale and really converting that value. I talked about how we're talking about trying to get to a situation of continuous transformation. And one dimension of that is getting to a state of continuous innovation that can scale. And that's really actually about putting some of the kind of more traditional rigor around innovation. So whilst we don't want to hamper creativity, what we do need to do is put some kind of structure and framework around how you do innovation on the cloud in an organization, to make sure that you're assessing the value of an invention or an innovation at every possible stage, and also thinking through, if we are to take this to scale, who will it impact, how will it impact, and what value will it drive back into the business. And I think we've had a real period of sort of like the Wild West, the frontier of innovation, and now's the time to sort of develop some of that governance that comes as things develop, and make sure that innovation isn't just completely piecemeal, but it's part of a larger strategy, and there's a continuous assessment really of the value that innovation is bringing.
Great stuff. I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you so much, Emma, for being with us here at Wired Smarter today. A great presentation, really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.